Hello, so this is going to be a video about what sort of weapons or improvised weapons would I imagine would be used in some sort of without rule of law event or shit hits the fan event in the UK. And I'm specifically doing the UK because I'm sure American sort of people have talked ad nauseum about this. And obviously in the US a lot of it's going to be firearms based, where in the UK it might be a bit more interesting than that. Well, not necessarily interesting, but you can get what I'm getting at. Bit more unusual, a bit more unconventional because of the fact that firearms are harder to obtain. So what I'm getting at is if something really bad happened and you had like a without rule of law kind of thing, like urban violence, rioting, something going massively out of control and the government losing power, or a civil war sort of scenario kind of breaking out. If people weren't supplied with proper firearms, what would they have? Now, at the end of the video I am going to talk about what kind of firearms might be used in the UK, because obviously it's certainly not going to be a scenario where there are no firearms, but it's probably going to be limited to a few options, so I'll talk about that at the end. Obviously, as usual, this video is not encouraging violence or anything like that, it's just taking, I guess, what would be an analytical look at what would be used. Now, the most commonly used thing, because it's currently the most commonly used thing for criminals, is kitchen knives. Here's one in bright pink. Apparently pink is okay, it's not a zombie knife green, but kitchen knives, simply for the fact they're very easy to get, they come sharp, and it doesn't take much effort to thrust one through somebody. Now, as said, we've got a knife crime problem in the UK. You can tackle that by having more policing, better policing, and probably more youth outlook sort of programs. You can't tackle it by saying things, online and feel good, politics, that won't solve it. But I don't want to get too much into that in this video, but I think kitchen knives of various types are going to be the most used thing in the shit hits the fan kind of scenario, simply because so many people have them laying around. They're in like every shop basically. So, if people wanted to arm themselves, I think kitchen knives are going to come pretty quickly into it. Now, I doubt proper spears and polearms would be used like this one. However, I could definitely see somebody attaching kitchen knives to poles and things like that, and then making improvised spears that way. So while I doubt you're going to get the proper military spears, I think you would see knives and varieties of that attached to poles. Now, I've not got any for this video here handy. But I also think things like cricket bats, baseball bats, tire irons, pickaxe handles, anything like that would also probably be used as like bludgeoning weapons, blunt force weapons. Now, gardening tools are another one. I've not got a whole selection of rakes and whatever else out, but obviously things like kukris, machetes, they're all going to be used. Things like machetes are commonly used in criminal sort of gangland stuff, along with kitchen knives as well, because again, you can get them very easily. And it doesn't take much effort for obviously somebody to smash somebody with a machete. So sadly, that's the way it currently goes in the UK, that there's lots of places, where a gang of people might set about on you with machetes. I think there was a killing near me a couple of years ago where golf clubs were used as well as machetes. So, just shows to show if somebody's you're going to be killed by a gang, what sort of stuff they might use. But as said, I think pretty much any kind of tool may be used in that scenario. Here's the very good Billhook Richard Weaponsmith did me. Now, this is a military bill, but of course you can get civilian bush hooks and, gardening bills, things like that from hardware stores. They just don't have the top spike on them. They just have, like it goes to there basically and without the reverse spike. So kind of like a sickle on a pole. Those, I think, as well, would be pretty common for people to be, fielding and some sort of thing like that. And things like pitchforks, and all sorts of gardening tools, I think would be employed as well. The point is that they're easy to get at. So with kitchen knives and sort of tools and sports gear, if people can get it easily, or they might already have it in their house, in an event where people start killing each other or threatening each other, they're probably going to be using stuff that's laying around. Now, actually, weirdly enough, despite what the government says in a lot of their legislation, I don't think actual swords or military-style knives are going to be used as much, simply because most people wouldn't have them. And, you know, if you were just simply saying, what could I quickly equip myself or cheaply equip myself with for like this breakdown of society, I think a lot of people would just be using machetes and kitchen knives rather than swords and daggers and, you know, everything like that. Okay, so now what I want to do is move on to the second part of the video where I'll talk about ranged sort of weapons. So I didn't bother getting any out for the video just because of the limited space, and I've obviously got the video set up with the better lighting now. But crossbows and bows I think probably would be used as well, maybe slingshots. But lots of people have crossbows and bows, and while they're legitimate sporting things, as I've said, simply banning them is not going to fix any of the problems. Just simply like banning kitchen knives wouldn't fix any problems. I could definitely imagine in some sort of outrule of law scenario people using crossbows and bows, simply because if you've got one and you've trained to use it, you're probably going to, you know, use it because you've got it and you're familiar with it. Air rifles as well. Now the interesting thing with air rifles is once you go into a scenario where people aren't following laws anymore, air rifles might be modified, and I'm obviously not going to go into details on how people might do that, but they might do things to increase the power of the air rifle. Now under UK law, if you've got an air rifle and you don't have a firearms licence, they have to be under 12 foot-pounds of muzzle energy regardless of the calibre. So if it's 177 or 22, it has to be under 12 foot-pounds. Now in some sort of event where, you know, people are not going to be worried about legislation and police anymore because people are literally killing each other and stuff like that and robbing each other, if you had an air rifle, people might easily modify it, you know, and as I said, I'm not going to go into how that can be done, but it can be done to increase the power, so they're going to be going well over 12 foot-pounds. Probably not massively more, because if they're not an air rifle specifically built for 12 foot-pounds plus, you know, it's not going to be that straightforward. However, it is important to note a lot of break barrel, you know, Springer style air rifles you can get in the UK. In other countries where they don't have the same legislation as us, those same air rifles are sold at higher power specification, and in the UK they just put a limiter in them or a weaker spring, something like that, to actually, you know, lower the pressure essentially of the CO2 when it's shot. So I could easily imagine a scenario where standard air rifles are being employed against people, or the air rifles have been modified to be more powerful. And again, if you've got a sort of, you know, 22 air rifle shooting at 20 plus foot-pounds, that is obviously at less than 100 yards got quite a good potential to wound and kill. So, you know, that could be a thing. Now, in terms of things like hunting shotguns and rifles, they could certainly be employed because a fair amount of people still own those in the UK, especially shotguns which are easier to get, so 4, 10, 20 and 12 gauge or bore. That would be pretty common, I would think. Mostly with birdshot or lower size buckshots, but I'm sure some people will get a buckshot or slugs or make their own improvised ammunition for them. So things like single and double barrel shotguns I would think would be a lot more, you know, commonly used in terms of firearms. Not things I wouldn't imagine like pump automatic or, you know, full capacity shotguns, because UK law basically says, you know, if you're a civilian and you get a shotgun licence, I think unless you jump through all the right hoops, you can only get one, you can only get, you know, a single barrel, double barrel, or a pump or an auto shotgun that's limited to 3 or less rounds, as in, you know, it's basically got no internal magazine or very small internal magazine. So in terms of shotguns, I think lots of people with single barrel and double barrel shotguns who may have sawn them off would be pretty common. In terms of rifles, things like, you know, 22 long rifles would be pretty common, especially like bolt action ones. Maybe some old Milsurp kind of calibers. And then obviously what you'd also have to consider is, because the police and the army have 9mm 5.56 and 7.62 NATO caliber firearms, it's probably quite common that those will start spilling out everywhere, either from, you know, rogue police and soldiers, or them being sold on the black market, or being captured and then, you know, redistributed. So, assuming even nobody else starts supplying firearms, we're not even considering what's currently on the black market in the UK, because it turns out there is a lot of firearms still here being used by criminals, because, you know, a lot of this legislation doesn't simply work, especially if you don't police it properly, or enforce laws on it properly. I could certainly imagine, you know, like whatever the army has, things like L85s and, you know, the police with like MP5 submachine guns and whatever, Glocks, and you know, things like the sort of designated marksman rifles, things like that, all, you know, turning up on the surplus market, or not, you know, surplus market, but all turning up in a sort of capacity where they'll be floating around in some sort of civil war or civil unrest scenario if things got really bad. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what, you know, would be happening. So as I said, you've got lots of people, I think, running around with kitchen knives or kukris or machetes that they can get out very easily from hardware stores, as well as pitchforks, you know, improvised spears, things like that, cricket bats, baseball bats, tire irons, any sort of heavy blunt object they can easily get, lengths of pipe, you know, things like that. Some people with crossbows and bows and slingshots, and then, you know, firearms that were both legal or illegal, as well as, you know, things that have now found their way into everybody else's capacity because they've, you know, fallen out of police or military hands or whatever else, or at least being employed in some sort of civil unrest. So yeah, and that's, you know, ignoring things like Molotovs and homemade smoke bombs and smoke grenades and all stuff like that. But I think that's what you'd probably encounter in a country like the UK and probably other European countries that have similar legislation to us. Because obviously in the US, if something like this happened, everybody already has firearms. So a lot of people would just be shooting each other, whereas in the UK and other places it's a little more interesting, and I say interesting, you know, like that. Just I think simply because people are going to work with what they've got or have to improvise.